So I'm just going to take a moment here. This is webinar 5 in the EBRI series, Teaching Fluency Across Levels, and I'm going to be co-presenting today. Some things happen, life happens. We had to reschedule the presenters, everything is great, but you're here with me today. I'm Kristine Kelly. I'm the Atlas Literacy Coordinator. I did the original certification for STAR, the Student Achievement in Reading with Marn way back when, and I have trained many years with Marn and worked with her on evidence-based reading instruction. So hopefully you'll feel in good hands. And joining me is the other part of the good hands.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rob Podlasek. I'm the training director for Literacy Minnesota. So my main function is to train volunteers working in adult education around the state. And fluency has always been part of that training because fluency is such an important part of reading instruction. But when Minnesota really started looking at evidence-based reading instruction with the STAR initiative and other things, we learned two things. One, reading fluency is kind of labor intensive if you're doing groupings and things like that. So volunteers became really important in providing fluency instruction. And the other thing is fluency is pretty volunteer friendly in terms of the activities that we typically do for fluency. Volunteers are very comfortable with and can do a great job teaching. So that's why I'm here today.
And Rob has been part of from about the beginning of the STAR state leadership team. He is part of all of our evidence-based reading discussions. So we are in good company today. So meeting 5 topics. What we're going to talk about today is we're going to talk about some evidence for teaching reading fluency across levels. Sometimes we think about fluency more as a lower level skill. I used to work with my students in my GED classroom, sometimes on fluency. What does good, fair, and poor oral reading sound like? We're going to hear from actual students. What does this mean for fluency instruction? What do some fluency routines or techniques look like across levels? And we're going to talk a little bit about ideal versus real life and how we can do that. And then talk briefly about some practitioner recommended fluency resources that are available. So just as a reminder, this is the 5th of 6 webinars. We did a little rescheduling. Webinar 6, which is about comprehension skills, will be June 2nd, same time slot, 1 to 2:30 p.m. And joining us will be Penny Brown. And she just knows all the things about comprehension, and it's a huge part of what she does with her students in her program. And then as a reminder, the CEUs will come with an evaluation after each meeting. And so many of you I know have been joining us for every single one. So thanks for that. As a reminder, Marissa's going to drop in the chat box. There is a participant folder that we've been using all along in these webinars with lots of materials. So please check that out. And we'll be referring to materials today from that folder as well for the fluency. Okay. So.
All right. I want to look at the evidence behind evidence-based reading instruction. So on the screen are a couple quotes that pull out fluency instruction. So I'm going to ask you to read the first quote, which is very academic. And in the chat, if you could give me a 5-word summary of that quote, because there are a lot of words in there. So 5-word summary or less, 5 words or less. What is that first sentence saying? There's a wake out there. Fluency impacts comprehension. Thank you, Kelly. More automatic equals good. Students must be able to read word well to understand. Good. Any other summaries there? The one I wrote down is we can't multitask. And despite what every boss has tried to tell me, our brains can't do 2 things at once. So if we are focusing on that decoding, we are not able to focus on that comprehension. And so automaticity in decoding has to be there. So that fluency has to be there. Okay. And I like that one. See the forest in spite of the trees. There's the poet in the group. So that's great. And then the second quote is sort of a sales pitch for the importance of fluency, and it's kind of like damning with faint praise, because generally led to moderate increases isn't exactly the best sales pitch. And Myron and I were talking about it, and what we've seen anecdotally is that it leads to more than moderate increases, especially with that intermediate level of student that we're working with, the ones who are trying to move from that sounding out word stage of reading to that comprehension stage of reading. So even though the research is kind of light, I'm going to say that experience is important. And Caroline's making a nice connection to math, which is, again, you have to have that automaticity with the math facts, the operations, in order to apply it. So,
and I would say the same about writing.
Yeah,
there needs to be certain understanding of structures and parts in order for students then to be creative.
Mm-hmm. And I always talk about, what's the learning target? Are we working on decoding? Are we working on comprehension? And they all work together, but when you're doing instruction, you work certain muscles. And so really important to work those fluency muscles. Go to the next slide, Kristine. So this is Marn's favorite fluency quote. Reading fluency builds a bridge to from decoding to comprehension. And she said, that's my favorite fluency quote. If you have a favorite fluency quote, be prepared to share it. And I kind of laughed at a little bit at the concept of having a favorite fluency quote. And then I realized, oh, I do have a favorite fluency quote. And that is, the goal of reading fluency isn't fluency, it's comprehension. And I may have come up with that quote. And I say it all the time in tutor training, because we can get really wrapped up in how fast are the students reading, or does it sound really good? And that's not the goal of reading fluency instruction. The goal of reading fluency instruction is to get to that comprehension. So it's a tool to the end, means to the end, not the end. Any other favorite fluency quotes out there? We can make a collection, publish a little book of them. There's got to be lots of them out there.
I'm sure I don't have a favorite fluency quote. I feel a little behind. I mean, I know Patsy's back there. Maybe take this one down. Fluency is good stuff. That was Kristine Kelly, 2023. It's good stuff.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I'm going to find one too.
All right. Pass it back to Kristine.
Okay, so fluency is obviously a very, very important foundational skill for students, and it is called out in the CCRS standards, the Blue Book. It is in a section, the reading foundational skills, which comes after the language standards in the Blue Book. And that is very, very clear that students need to read with sufficient accuracy and fluency to support comprehension. So, reading words with accuracy, making sure they can read immersion and grade level texts with purpose and understanding, reading grade level text. And that's nonfiction, that's prose, that's poetry, it's any kind of text with accuracy, rate, and that expression or prosody. And then being able to use context and other clues to help with comprehension and to help with word recognition, because context is a great clue for our students to use, but they have to have a solid understanding of most of the words around the unfamiliar word in order to be able to use that context clue effectively. Thank you, Patsy. Fluency is the ability to read like you speak, from Read Naturally. And some of you may have worked with Read Naturally. It's been around for a long time. And I know that if you're familiar with reading skills for today's adults, out of Marshall, that was built on the Read Naturally model. Back to Rob to talk about the dimensions.
Yep, when we talk about reading fluency, there are 4 components of reading: alphabetics, vocabulary, fluency, and comprehension. And then within fluency, there are 3 dimensions: and accuracy, rate, and prosody. And if you worked on with K-12 and fluency, you know that they're really absolute about these things. And in adult education, we tend to be a little bit more holistic in how we measure them, because there are differences in what people are doing with reading, what they're reading, and so forth. The first one is accuracy, and that's reading the words that are on the page. So if it says dog, you don't say dig. And research shows that we need about 90 to 95% accuracy. If you are reading a topic that you know a lot about, it can be much less. If you're reading a language that you're comfortable in, it can be less. But for most of us, it's about 90 to 95%. And I think there's a difference in accuracy between misreading a word because it's not really that important, you're thinking about comprehension, to actually putting effort into sounding out the word and getting it wrong. So I think there are kind of two different kind of accuracy errors. But the important thing is nobody needs to read at 100% accuracy. So if they're missing words, that's okay. The question is, does it impact comprehension? The second is rate, how fast we read. And again, in K-12 education, we have benchmarks. We know how fast a first grader should be able to read. A third grader should be able to read. We don't have statistics for how fast a 35-year-old man should be able to read. Those numbers are meaningless. So we want to say as quickly as possible without sacrificing comprehension. And probably for most of our students, it's a matter of getting them to read more quickly. But I work with students who think the faster read, the better, right? There is that sweet spot. And again, it will depend upon your comfort level with the content, but efficient rate of speed for what you are reading. And then the third term is prosody. And that's where you get into, does it sound like natural speech? Is the natural chunking there? Is the tone going up and down and so forth? And so reading in meaningful phrases and with some expression. And again, here's where the goal of reading fluency isn't making your students sound like James Earl Jones when they read. It's making sure that they comprehend what they read. And so is the prosody helping them comprehend or not? Sorry, I'm hearing my sound is cutting in and out. We'll try to look at a solution there. All right, pass it back to Kristine.
You almost called me Kelly.
I did.
Yeah, and as far as rate goes, also, as Rob said, you know, reading really, really fast. You know, we have some good, I've always had good conversations with my students that that effective readers don't actually read fast. They adjust their rate. And so obviously, depending if they're reading poetry, their rate and prosody is going to be a little bit different. They may read much slower for emphasis, as opposed to maybe reading a short piece of nonfiction aloud. So we have ratings, and the point, as Rob said, is really to answer the question, does a student need fluency instruction or not? And so if any of you are K-12 trained reading people or elementary people, you may remember doing fluency, doing miscue analysis, making all kinds of marks on the text, depending if there was an omission, a substitution, repeated words, self-corrected, all of those things. We are not asking to do those things. We are really listening kind of holistically and deciding kind of, yes, does a student need fluency instruction or not? And where's the accuracy and the rate and prosody. So I know early on we were incredibly worried about assigning the wrong score. And what we discovered is that no students were actually harmed during early fluency instruction. If you decide that a student needs fluency instruction, and you start them on a particular level and they actually could be on something higher, you just make the adjustment in the classroom, right? Using real-time data. So again, as we're listening, we don't want to get too caught up in some of the particulars. Go for a feeling, not a number. I think that's great. Rob just put that. So we are going to actually listen to 3 different students who were tested in Minneapolis, and we're going to listen, and then we're going to talk a little bit about the rate and prosody and the accuracy and the score that was given, and a potential range for instruction. So thank you, Patsy, for running these slides.
All right, are you ready for that first clip?
Yeah, the first one is a level 8. So this is as high as we go. This is as high of a leveled reading as we would go in fluency instruction. And so as you can see, there was a rating, a 3 for good accuracy, the plus rate/prosody, but still listen so you can get a good idea of what we're talking about.
Hold on.
This is a story to learn more about mail order shopping. Okay?
Mm-hmm. Jeannie and Kim had been shopping for equipment for their camping trip. For several days, they had been going from store to store looking for things they needed. Shopping was taking a long time and was very inconvenient. Their neighbor said that he had been shopping by sending the things through a mail order catalog for years. Jean
Yep.
Jean said that he had heard about mail order shopping, but he was worried about getting their money back if something was wrong with the purchase. When the neighbor told Jean and Kim that the store offered a refund warranty, they asked him if they could borrow his catalog.
All right. Thank you, Patsy. If you could tick back a slide. So this was rated by the assessor as a 3. It is not perfect. The accuracy was good. There was a little bit of a stumble on the name Jean. There was a little stumble on the word guarantee, which has that interesting GUA, which can be a little bit problematic for students, but otherwise it flowed pretty well. And the question is the student reading at a rate, prosody, and accuracy level to be able to comprehend? Yeah, thank you, Michelle. That's really good. The scale is it's 3 out of 3. So we to go back here, if you want to tick back a slide, Patsy. So we talk about 1, 2, and 3. There's not a 0 on here because I think, if we get a student and the student is having a very, very difficult time even sounding out any words, that would be a 0. But yep, we want to do it on a 1 to 3 scale, keep it simple. And in this case, it's not perfect, but it's pretty smooth. It's pretty accurate. Michelle, let me tell you something. I could blush all day long with the things that thank you. And I bet somebody else needed a review of that slide too. So thank you. So go up, Patsy. Rob, do you want to say anything about that reading?
No, again, I think the other thing to think about is how does language background get in the way? And a lot of things that sometimes we perceive as errors are just language differences. And so again, does his reading sound like his speaking? And that's a big thing to think about, is the pronunciation difference, or is it truly a decoding error?
Right. And I think that's a really, really good point. One of the things we've talked about over the years was the idea of not considering if words are affected by a dialect or an accent, we don't need to count those ones. I think about like the ED ending. Now, for accuracy, okay. Yes, we want students to work. ED endings can be very difficult for students because there's so many different ways that we can pronounce them. However, the question is it interrupting comprehension? And so I think that for me, I was really hyper focused as a K-12 trained person, reading person. I was hyper focused and I just had to let go of that and go, you know what? For the purposes of this, it was good. And the instructional text range then would be a grade level. The text would be a 8+. The student doesn't necessarily need fluency instruction, but we do have maybe 8 for nonfiction. And that is because that text, a lot of times when students are reading something that's maybe more narrative, the structure is more familiar to them. And then if we actually test them again on a piece of nonfiction where there might be a lot more unfamiliar vocabulary or unfamiliar structures, they may actually be a little bit slower. So that's something we also discovered, that if you are using a passage for fluency that's more of a narrative structure, you may want to do one at the same level that is at a nonfiction, just to get an idea if the student needs more work maybe in the nonfiction. Next slide, Patsy. Now we're going to listen to a level 5. And note that this student was rated a 2, so fair overall, and listen for the rate and prosody in particular. So go ahead, Patsy.
We'll do the next one. This is a passage about how deer can be a problem.
Bamba is a children's story that was made into a Walt Disney movies. In the story, Bambi is a baby deer who play with other baby forest animals. When Bambi is almost growing, a hunter shoots Bambi a mother, and Bambi goes to the life with his father. In real life, deer have caused many car crashed when they try to cross the road. This is especially true at night. When driver cannot see it as well, people have been hurt and some have died because of those car crash. If too many deer live in an area, it can cause a problem. Besides causing the car crash, they can also cause property damage. They eat people's plants and garden. Having too many deer in an area is not good for either people or the deer. Too many deer is one reason states allow hunters to get a license to shoot deer.
So we have an assessment of a 2 overall. The student was reading words pretty accurately. However, where the breakdown seemed to happen was with the rate and prosody, which is going to impact the student's ability to fully understand. So therefore, at this point, a 2, meaning some of the pieces are there, it's fair, right? It's fair. The instructional text range would be about a 5-6. So for example, for accuracy, working specifically on accuracy, potentially up on the 6th grade part of the range, rate and prosody on the 5th grade. Why wasn't the prosody rated a neg? I think that the negative there that Marn put there is for both rate and prosody. So it's positive accuracy, but the one negative sign is for both the rate and the prosody. Any comments on that one, or anything, Rob, you'd like to add about that level 5?
No, again, as I watch it, I think about the comprehension and always wanting to check to see if those things did impact the comprehension or not.
Yeah, and so you want the student working on to improve the rate and prosody, working on text where the student has accuracy in place, so that the student can then really focus on chunking those words and phrases and clauses and paying attention to the end punctuation and to the different sentences, questions, things like that. We've got one more here. And this is a level 2 passage. I'll talk a little bit about the passages that are available to you to use. And this one you're going to hear is really a 1 across the board. It's a poor reading with accuracy, rate, and prosody. So let's take a listen.
Another one, okay? This is a story about how a boy or a man, we're not sure, helps someone.
Okay. Some buys a new newspaper. Some stopped to ask Mr. K if she needed anything for the store. She was very old. Some liked to help her. She asked him to buy her a newspaper. Some went to the store. The store wasn't closed. Some walked for a long time to another store. He asked for a newspaper. One was folded and put into his bag. Some give Miss K the paper. She said, "Oh, Sam, you are so good. I haven't seen a paper written in Greek of months." Sam was surprised, but he just said, "You are very welcome, Mr. Key."
Okay, I've gone back and forth on this one a little bit as far as the accuracy goes, because a lot of the words that she reads are slow, but she hits them accurately. But I think there are just a few too many, and it certainly isn't going to be harmful to the student to be working on the grade equivalent first grade text on accuracy. As soon as the student is reading, her accuracy is improved, and then we just move up a step. But I think that the rate and prosody, very clearly, for this student or for any student who is reading at this rate and with such little expression, comprehension is going to be very, very difficult. So this student obviously needs fluency instruction in both accuracy and rate and prosody, which is why we have a range here. And if I could ask you to go back a few slides, we're really making Patsy work today, to the reading fluency ratings again. So right before these videos. Thank you. So just as a reminder again, and I think that that thinking in terms of the letters here at the end of each one. 3, good enough, not perfect. Accuracy is in place. For the most part, rate and prosody is there. Fair, accuracy is there. The student is reading most of the words okay, but the rate is slow, or there's not much expression, or just poor, which is where there is little accuracy of reading the words, and there's little to no rate and prosody happening. And again, we're doing this holistically. So we just need to know that we can always make adjustments. We can always choose a different text in the classroom for a student. We can move them up a text. And Rob will be talking more about some ways that we can work with fluency with students in the classroom, different ways depending on what they're working on. Any questions about
As I watched the video, I was watching what Krista marked wrong, and it wasn't word endings, it wasn't accented things, but there were a few words that she just truly missed. And so that's what she called out as an accuracy error, as opposed to, you could theoretically mark every single word as an error, but she just focused on those words she truly didn't get.
Yeah, and I think that it's important. I'll take the slide over now, Patsy. Thank you so much. I just think it's important, again, to remember there, that rather than take all of these different, the way the words are said, if they're substituted, if their meaning change, etc., just to do it holistically. We know that we have little time in the classroom, and evidence-based reading is based on doing assessment and then using that data to plan instruction. So we need to get information as quickly as we can. I want to look here in the chat box. Okay, good. Thank you. And just to let you know, the text, the fluency texts that Krista was using with her students are part of the Bader fluency assessment. The Bader fluency assessment is something that we do have available at Atlas. You have to email me directly about it because we have an agreement with Pearson to be able to use those texts specifically for teachers in Minnesota for reading assessment, but also in the participant folder that we've been using throughout these EBRI webinars. There is a file called Quick Easy Reading Assessments, and there is a great choice of free assessments there that you can also use for fluency. The one benefit of the Bader fluency passages is we do have a nifty scoring sheet that goes with that, that has the reminder of the rubric and a reminder of what where to place someone for an instructional level. Thank you so much, Marisa, for dropping that again. So it doesn't, we haven't found that one set or the other has worked better. You just need a set of leveled passages to do this. And the Bader we've used very successfully with adults, and the quick and easy adult reading assessments that's in your participant folder. They're not childish passages at all. They are written for adults. So you've got some resources there. So we talked, or we had on each of those slides the fluency instructional text range, and that is based on where they have the highest scores of 2 and 1 mainly. So what we're going to take a look at here, we're going to do a little poll here, but before you do that, Marisa, when we're talking about a fluency instructional level for accuracy, that's going to be the last level where the student was given a score of 1. That's going to be where we start with accuracy. For rate and prosody, that level is determined by the highest level a student received a 2. So that's where we get the range. The lower end of the range is where we work on accuracy. The higher end of the range is where we would focus more on rate and prosody. So based on that, we have a question here. What's the fluency instructional text range? So the student was given a fluency assessment, a level 1 passage. The rating was 3, meaning rate and prosody, accuracy, everything was in place for the most part. Level 2 passage, again, a score of 3, meaning it was good enough. There was accuracy and there was rate and prosody. Level 3, there was a rating of 2, meaning the accuracy was in place, but now the student is struggling with rate and prosody. And the level 4 text was a 1, which meant this is where most everything began to break down: accuracy, rate, and prosody. So Marisa, if you would launch that poll. What is the fluency instructional text range with this set on your screen of assessment scores? All right, give you about 5 more seconds here. Great, thank you for your participation in this poll. Okay, so we see the results. The answer is levels 3 to 4, because for no, I've to make sure I don't get this goofed up, it's been a long week. So the last level that a student received a 1 would be where we would work on accuracy. Okay, that would be the 4. The last level that the student received a 2 would be the level that we would work on rate and prosody. So that brings us to that range there, depending on the element of fluency we're working with. Let's try another one. We've got 3. So now if you look at the scores, what would be the fluency instructional text range for these 3 scores? All right. The answer is levels 5 and 6. Again, we have the highest rating of the 2, which is level 5. That's the rate and prosody. That's where we would want to work on rate and prosody with the student. The student is pretty accurate at level 5, so we would go up to a level 6 text where the last score was where the last score of 1 happened, and that would be where we'd want to work on accuracy. We've got 1 more. So we've got 3 more scores here. What would be the fluency instructional text range for these scores? Go ahead, Marisa.
It's not letting me launch this one.
It's not. Well, let me see if I can launch it. Oh my goodness. Can you see it if I move it? Nope. Well, let's just on the fly. In the chat box, do you think it is? Oh yes, Caroline, don't worry. This is not, this is, yep, this is something that you have available in your participant folder. What would it be 6-7 for the fluency instructional text range, or 7-8? So you're already ahead of me because we're ABE people and we can just pivot in a second. I see some 7-8s. I see some 6-7s. Any more? This one would be a range of 7-8. Again, 8 would be the grade level that we'd want to work with students on accuracy, level 7 text, or a grade level 7 approximately. You know, grade levels, pro and cons with adults, but that is where the student would likely have accuracy in place and could then focus more on the rate and prosody. They've got to have that automaticity in place to really be able to focus on improving that expression, that rate and prosody. Anything to add, Rob?
Yeah, I just want to say, in K-12, we use fluency assessment as a benchmark. And so those numbers are important. But for us, we're just trying to find the right level of text. And so, again, go for that feeling, trust your teacher's sense. This will give you a general idea of what the appropriate text is. And if it turns out to be too hard, go down. If it turns to be too easy, go up. I always compare it to going to the gym. You try to find a weight that's the right weight. You pick one. If it's too heavy, you pick a lighter one. If it's too light, you pick a heavier one. So it's just, again, trust your teacher sense.
Yes, and in the participant folder, there are quite a few files in here, but you will find some different files on fluency, including some of the most recent evidence as of last year for fluency instruction, as if we, needed to be convinced. But you will find information about teaching fluency. If you have any questions at all, you can ask me. There are scoring guidelines. And as I said, I get regular emails from people asking me for the Bader passages, or asking me for a scoring sheet, or even asking me where to start. And I am always happy to answer those emails. So thank you. We're coming up here on a break, but just a couple more things I want to talk quickly about. So Rob's going to talk about some really concrete examples of fluency instruction. And we're just going to start with ideal. Like, if all things were in place, we would want to work across levels, from letter, sound, word readings to short text to longer, a lot of nonfiction text. Ideally, we could form groups with students at similar and slightly challenging instructional text levels. So you could put students together who are in the range of 1-2. You could even put students who need to be working between a larger range of 2-4, 6-7, 6-8, no more than 3 levels, though, as far as one group. And ideally, proficient English speakers can lead oral readings for a short period of time. Fluency lessons do not have to be very long. And you can check comprehension with a few who, what, where, when, why, or how questions. There isn't formal comprehension instruction going on, but you can certainly stop and ask some questions to see if students are tracking. Again, very important that the person modeling the oral reading is a proficient English speaker. So I know that depending if you have volunteers, or sometimes we have other students, we want to make sure that they too are reading. I give you a great example. My husband, when I give him something to read out loud, or when he reads something out loud, his rate and prosody is so-so. He's just not comfortable reading aloud. And so if he were a volunteer, I'd be like, well, maybe I might read it instead. So you really want the person modeling to be able to model both accuracy, rate, and prosody. And focus on repeated oral readings with modeling, guided practice, application to comprehension. You want to work with different text lengths, different types, different structures. So ideally, everyone who needs fluency instruction is getting it. They're getting it. If they need accuracy, if they need rate and prosody, if they need both, you've got groups running, you've got proficient English speakers, and you are using explicit instruction. And Rob does note volunteers are a great way to allow multiple groupings to happen. And I know that volunteers in my former program at Robbinsdale loved to do fluency with students, loved to do one-on-one or small groups and lead the fluency, because these are such concrete activities and volunteers really, really love them. This is ideal. We're going to talk more about how it's really working. Before we go on a break, you've got two sentence stems. And I would like you to choose one and type it in the chat box. Something resonating with me right now, as we've talked about the importance of fluency, a little bit about assessing fluency, a little bit about rate and prosody. What's still puzzling you? And we'll take a quick break. Resonating or puzzling? The need to rate. Yep. Accurately giving ratings. And I will tell you that when you actually, I think a lot of us found when we actually did this in real life with a real student, it just made a whole lot more sense when we actually did it ourselves. Something resonating with me is that reading doesn't have to be 100% accurate. Yeah, and Rob said that so well. Thank you, Emma, that it doesn't have to be. I am a very proficient reader, but I get tongue-tied, right? Or I sometimes miss expression or emphasis. Couple more here. Resonating, the feeling of accomplishment when students make improvements in fluency. Yeah, that's a good one. Don't get too wrapped up in numbers. Feel it out. Remember that we have research, okay? We also have practitioner wisdom, okay? We have learned a lot working with students, and we have good instincts. Where to start with very low level students? You know what? I would kick that over to Patsy, actually. Very low level students.
Where to start with very low level students? Tell me more.
While Patsy is trying to think, I would just say reading to them, doing some modeled reading is a great way to bring it in with low level students.
Yeah.
They can just listen. You don't have to do anything more with that. They just get a chance to hear that accuracy rate and prosody in English.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to begin. I also, wouldn't discount just starting with conversation. Like, students can't read about what they can't talk about, right? So, be sure to up the level of oral work going on in the classroom as you're upping the level of literacy work as well.
That's a great reminder of that oral work. Students are going to read what they can't talk about, and they're not going to write what they can't read or talk about. So I think that's really good. And again, that might be, and Rob's going to talk a little bit, that might be very heavily supported fluency instruction, where students really are very carefully listening and repeating directly. The connection between fluency and increased comprehension. Yes, fluency skills help with students' comprehension, and it's important that we make that connection for them as well. Should be doing more of it, and you can have some very powerful short lessons that really do result in some great progress. Yes, trust teacher feeling. Just get them to repeat and repeat. Rob's going to talk more about that when we come back from this short break. Thank you for your ways that you're resonating and some things you're still puzzling on. Let's take 5 minutes. We'll come back and we'll hear more strategies for doing this work. Okay, let me know if you're back. You can give me an emoji, a thumbs up. That was a quick break, but you can show me your face for a moment. Are you back? Thank you, Mike. Lori, thank you, Naomi, for showing your face. Thank you in the chat box. Great. I appreciate. Probably weren't able to go too far. All right. Doretta, thank you. Okay, thank you for your emojis and your faces and your thumbs up. We're going to jump back in here, and I'm going to just talk very briefly about some fluency accuracy routines, and then turn it over to Rob for some good concrete fluency routines. So some routines that you can use to help develop accuracy. are having students name or identify the alphabet, right? Out of order, working specifically with the letters. Students hearing and saying the primary sounds, so saying the consonants and saying the short vowel patterns. Reading aloud word families, sight words, high frequency words. On the Atlas website, we've got lists. We've got lists of the FRI words. I think the first 1,000 words, which are used in K-12. I've used them very successfully with adult students. And also high frequency phrases as well from FRI. Students can read aloud key words from language instruction. So the work you're doing in other areas, scaffolding to phrases, from words to phrases to sentences or short paragraphs, using some of those taught words. So working on some key sight words. I used to do that with my Liberian students. We would work on some key sight words from FRI. Then I would make up sentences that used a lot of those words so that students could work with more connected text. Students can hear and say the English consonant beginnings or endings, blends. Okay, so those can be complicated, the consonant digraphs and those vowel teams. And so working on some of those patterns, those letter sound patterns. Again, reading aloud family, sight, or high frequency words, so they're working on words that have the biggest bang for the buck. So obviously sight words are very important early on, but as students really gain traction with sight words, we look at maybe words that have multi-syllables that are more high frequency even. Read aloud keywords, again, from language instruction. And again, just having them work and being exposed to those words over and over again. I think that one of the things I've been excited about is to see how AI, when we talk about ChatGPT and its ability to create texts, I know I have some colleagues who are using it to actually create texts for fluency practice. So there's some great possible implications for that. Now, Rob, I'm going to turn it over to you, and you're going to talk about, I think the high support was something that came up before the break. So.
Right. So we're going to talk about a variety of fluency activities. And nice thing about fluency is that there's really a finite list of activities to do. It's not like comprehension where there are a gabillion possible things that you can do and you really need to pick your favorites. I think with fluency, there are a handful, 7, 8 activities that teachers do, that tutors can do. Lots of variation within the activity, but some very, very simple activities. So the first one is modeled reading, and that's simply reading to the students so they hear an example of fluent reading. And, we read to kids all the time because they don't have the ability to do the decoding. And then once they start to decode, we stop reading to them and we say, now you do all the work. And that's the same with adult students, especially those intermediate level students. We're like, you need to read everything. So you practice your decoding, and you want to take some time to read to them so that they are not just hearing their own struggling reading, right? You want them to be able to hear reading with good accuracy, rate, and prosody. So on the screen are some tips for one way to do modeled reading. The first one, pick a text within the group's instructional level. And I don't think that's really that important if you're reading to them, especially if they're not following along. And I think it's a really great opportunity to bring in authentic texts with long sentences, complicated phrasing, so they get that exposure to that. Otherwise, they're just reading those very simple sentences that those beginning and intermediate level readers do. I remember there was a student in one of our programs working with a tutor, and she was working on very basic reading. But at the end of every lesson, the tutor would read out loud from the student's favorite text, and that was a biography of Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis. And so for 15 minutes, she would read that out loud as sort of a way to hear what fluent reading sounds like. And I think it was kind of aspirational for the student. And I think the other volunteers and students were either like, yeah, this is great, keep reading it, or can you pick another text? So the idea is you're going to read the title and the entire passage out loud while the students follow along. Again, if you're using higher level text, they don't have to follow along, they can just listen. Number 3 is provide simple meaning or examples for a few key words. Don't turn it into a vocabulary lesson. But if there are a couple words that make sense to explain, take the time to do that. And then the suggestion is recycle. So once you've read it to them, providing that high support, then you can move on to activities that provide less and less support. And we'll be talking about those in a little bit. But, you know, repetition is really good. Mike talked about reading it over and over again, repeating it over and over again. And I think cycling through those activities with the same text is a great way to get that, that practice. Again, going back to the purpose of reading comprehension or reading fluency isn't fluency, it's comprehension. So take some time to ask a few higher level who, what, when, where, how questions. You don't want to dig into the whole details, but do ask some questions just to kick it back into the comprehension realm and make sure that that comprehension is there. And the other suggestion is to do silent rereadings. And we've been talking about having the students read out loud because the only way we can measure reading fluency is if they read out loud. But reading out loud is kind of an artificial activity. It's not something we do a lot. We've had a lot of people talk about how I'm a good reader, but I'm not a good reader reading out loud. And that's a very true statement. And research suggests that reading out loud actually impedes comprehension. If you've ever read something out loud at church or something like that, you go, oh, I just read it and it sounded good, but I have no idea what I read. So giving students time to do silent reading after you've done the oral activity is really important. All right, next slide. So next activity, a little less support for the student, but still really falls into the high support category, is echo reading. And so you read and the student repeats back what you have just read. And because for this one, they are going to be decoding the text, you do want to pick a text that's within their instructional level. And then you are going to read back a sentence or a phrase or a paragraph, depending upon what you're reading and how much the students can hold on to. You read it out loud and they repeat it out loud after you, okay? I like number 3, just sort of a classroom management thing. Only the teacher is allowed to provide corrections in that situation where other students want to jump in and correct, but you want to put those ground rules that only the teacher gets to correct, okay? And after you've done it sentence by sentence or phrase by phrase, then do it again paragraph by paragraph. So the student is expected to do a little bit more work. So we're going to do a little practice here. Don't flip the screen yet, Kristine. I'm going to call on a volunteer. So is somebody out there awake and willing to help me out for this? Look at everyone avoiding eye contact virtually. I love that. Okay, Lori, thank you very much. If you could unmute yourself.
Okay, can you hear me?
All right, I can hear you. Thank you. So what I'm going to do is I am going to read a sentence and then I'm going to have you repeat it back after me. And in real life, the student's going to have the text in front of you, but because you're probably a pretty good reader, to model what it might be like, we are going to try this. So you ready?
Yes.
All right. Do you know what a Venus flytrap is? Okay.
Do you know what a Venus flytrap is?
The Venus flytrap is a plant.
The Venus flytrap is a plant.
It's a special plant.
It's a special plant.
Because of something it does.
Because of something it does.
It catches.
It catches.
Or traps.
Or traps.
Flies and other bugs.
Flies and other bugs.
Okay, I'll do that again. Do you know what a Venus flytrap is?
Do you know what a Venus flytrap is?
The Venus flytrap is a plant.
The Venus flytrap is a plant.
It's a special plant because of something it does.
It's a special plant because of something it does.
It catches or traps flies and other bugs.
It catches and traps flies and other bugs.
All right, great. Thank you very much for being my student. And so just an example of what it might sound like in real life. I gave a sentence, Lori repeated it. For that longer sentence, I broke it up. I chunked it into a meaningful phrase. And then I went back and did it with the longer phrase, the longer sentence. Okay, I want to flip to the next screen. There is the text for you. So in real life, have that in front of the students. They could follow along. In some cases, they are just going to be repeating out loud what you said. And I think that's okay. That's kind of a step of reading development. Kids do that naturally when they're learning to read. So if they're just repeating back, don't say, you're not really reading, what's that third word? Just recognize that they're kind of getting it because they are working phrase. I'm going to stop and ask if people tried this in their classes. What has their experience been? What tips would you share with other people in the group? Go ahead, either unmute or just type out your thoughts.
While people are thinking, I can say that in my work with students over the years, of course, we have adults, and many times we can have adults who have a larger oral vocabulary than they have a print vocabulary. So one of the things that was always fun when I was working with some students is if we would do echo reading, they would get excited because they would say, oh, that's what that word looks like. They would, because they knew a lot of the words orally, but now they were seeing them in print, making that connection, and they would get pretty excited.
That's one of my favorite moments when someone says, is that what that word looks like? You know, when they make that connection. So that's pretty cool. All right, let's flip to the next activity, which is called repeated reading. And this is where students get a chance to practice and get some feedback on what they've read. Lots of different ways to do this. So whatever works in your teacher's style is great. So you're going to pick that text and you want it to be within their instructional text levels, something where the accuracy is good. What they're really working on is the rate and prosody. And then you're going to ask them to read it cold. Okay, so read it out loud for me. Okay, just like Krista had the students read out loud in the video. And then you're going to discuss with the students, what could you improve? You might say, you know, that was great, but next time, if you could work on reading it a little faster or a little slower, or if you could work on the chunking, or if you could work on paying attention to the punctuation, or whatever you want to work. And I always compare this to when I was taking piano lessons. I'd play the song, and then the teacher would say, that was great. This is what you need to work on. And of course, I knew what I needed to work on too, just like our students often know what they need to. There's a question, do high support activities work best for lower levels? I think they work with all levels. It's kind of universal design. If an activity works well with a lower level student, I think it also works well with a higher level student, especially for building that rate and prosody. They can really do that in those higher support activities.
Yes, and I was going to say that in my I didn't do echo reading in my kind of pre-GED GED classroom, but I did do repeated readings with students where they would read it cold the first time, and then we would talk about, you know, we would set those goals and things, and that was great for those students because they can work on that passage and they can really, you know, see their progress, and it's very concrete to them from the first time they read something to, you know, after reading it multiple times. But I would do this, and again, And then Mike, I'm going to have Rob address your question. And because a lot of my students were struggling, one of their biggest struggles with the GED was going to be the fact that they had fluency issues. They couldn't get through the reading. And that was something then where people might say, well, when they get that high into the high school equivalency classroom, they don't need fluency. A lot of them needed rate and prosody in particular in order to really be able to understand what they were reading. Rob, there's a kind of a, there's a question there from Mike, read it aloud cold. What if they have lots of problems?
You know, again, you're picking a text within our instructional level. So you want to pick a text that they have the accuracy, but they're really working on the rate and prosody. If they're struggling, you can stop and pick an easier text, or you can just shift to an easier activity. I've said, you know what, I'm going to switch and I'll read this and you repeat after me in the heat of the moment. Okay. And question number 3, nope, they're still reading orally because we're working on that oral language prosody. So typically what I've seen is student will read, there'll be some discussion, the teacher or the tutor will model, okay, this is what good rate sounds like, or this is what it means to do the chunking, or this is what it means to pay attention to the punctuation. And then the student will go off and practice by themselves. Great place to use a volunteer where they can sit and work with that person. And then they come back. And again, it's like, is this good enough? Are we ready? You want to keep working on the same text, or you want to work to move to a different text? I come back so much to piano lessons because I think the experience is very similar. Those music lessons and reading fluency. A good question from Doretta. When do you check for understanding of vocabulary? Again, don't turn it into a vocabulary lesson. It's possible that they are reading very fluently with words that they don't know. That's not a fluency issue. That's a vocabulary issue. So what I'll usually do, or what I've done, is make a mental note. Do they know this word? But usually when I do comprehension, it'll be at those higher level questions and not getting into the individual vocabulary words. If you want to work on vocabulary from that text, that's great. Just do it at your vocabulary part of your lesson, okay? Or else everything turns into a vocabulary lesson. That's
or a comprehension lesson, right?
Yeah.
We have to keep the focus. These can be short lessons, it can be 15-minute lessons, right? And we want them to stay, we want the focus to stay on fluency. Mike, you got it. I think that's a wonderful analogy. Cold reading is like sight reading music. It's like first time through.
Mm-hmm.
What does it say? That's a great way to put it.
Yeah. And it usually isn't very good the first time through, right? So that's why you need to practice. And talking about music is a good way to preface fluency activities, because sometimes adult students will say, we already read this, did it once. And it's like, well, yeah, but you don't just play a song once when you're learning to play. You play it over and over and over again, and that's how you build fluency. Kids know that. They want to read the same book over and over again. Adults are like, did this before, don't want to do it. All right.
I'm sorry, I've read Lord of the Rings like 400 times. I just had to say that.
Yeah.
All right, flip to the next slide. So next slide is choral reading, paired reading, neurological impress method. Has a lot of names, but it's all essentially the same activity. So you're reading aloud together. And actually, in terms of order of support, I tend to put this after reading out loud to the student, then you read and they repeat. And then I tend to do choral reading as the third option. So you're going to pick a text within the group's instructional level, because they are going to be reading, and you are going to read out loud, and they are going to read out loud with you, hence choral or duet. And you, as the teacher, are going to be modeling good accuracy, rate, and prosody. It doesn't have to be perfect. None of us are perfect readers out loud, or out loud readers, or whatever it is, but you want it to be good. Okay? And they read aloud with you. Now, this is a really easy one to do when we're all in the same room, because everybody can be talking at the same time. It's tougher to do virtually because everybody can't be talking or things are cutting out and it's really messy. So the easiest way to do this is for the teacher to have his or her microphone on, and the students to not have their microphones on, but to have their cameras on. And that way you can see if they're reading aloud with you. So I'm going to check to see who's awake out there. If you are willing to turn on your camera, please do so. Patsy, always willing to play along. There you go. Hi, Lori. Hi, everyone. All right, if you want to just flip to the next slide. Got to get all my windows out of the way. So I'm going to read this out loud with my microphone on, and you can read it out loud with your microphones off. Okay, so on your mark, get set, go. On the 1st of December, 1955, the African-American seamstress Rosa Parks helped change the course of history on a city bus. Rosa boarded the bus after a day's work at the Montgomery, Alabama department store. She settled towards the middle, past the first several rows, which at that time were reserved for white people. After making a few stops, the bus became full. Then a white man boarded, but there was nowhere for him to sit. The driver ordered Rosa and the rest of the black passengers in her row to stand at the back of the bus and let the white man sit. In an act of defiance that would help intensify the American Civil Rights Movement, Rosa refused to give up her spot. Okay, so that is an example of choral reading if you're in a group, duet reading if it's one-on-one. Okay, any challenges you've had doing this activity or any challenges you could envision in real life with this activity?
I do this all the time as I've been restudying my Spanish these last 3 years. I choral read all the time with my lessons. It's just, I just actually thought of that.
That's cool. Yep, and that's the thing. Some read faster than others. That's why it's important to do that grouping as much as possible. Getting out of sync is a reality. Don't worry about it too much. The biggest thing is how fast should you read as a teacher? And if you read at a truly normal rate of speed, you're going to blow them all to water. But if you slow it down like this, it's kind of like defeating the purpose. So the students can't keep up with you. Pick an easier text with shorter sentences, more familiar vocabulary. If they really want to learn about Rosa Parks, then read it to them or do repeated reading. So slow down a little bit, but not too much. And again, in a group, you're going to have people doing different things. That's why having tutors working with a couple students is valuable, because they can really focus in on the issue. I'll tell you, this is an activity that students tend to like 10 times more, 100 times more than students, and tutors, because we read up here, we do this with students, it pulls us down like, wow, this is a wonky activity. Why would anyone do it? But students read down here, and when they read with us, it pulls them up. And I remember saying this at a training one time, and a woman said, oh, this is just like choir. And I said, how's it like choir? She goes, oh, I get choir practice a half hour early so I can stand next to the really good singer. Because when I'm next to the good singer, I'm better. And I'm sure the good singer's like, please get away from me. You're dragging me down. But it's pure patterning. So read aloud, they keep up with you. All right, I'm going to flip to the next slide. So the last activity we'll talk about is a collaborative oral reading, which is a fancy name for taking turns. And so you just switching back and forth between you and the students. And the directions are on the screen. There's so many different logistical things to think about when you're doing this activity. Lots of teachers do it lots of different ways. So the idea is you're going to read, and then the student will read, and another student will read, and another student will read. And sort of one guideline is we'll do popcorn reading so they're not just counting ahead and they're paying attention. So ideally, you'll read, call on a student, they'll read a couple sentences, they'll call on another student, read a couple sentences. Okay? Logistically, that can be messy. Just going round robin works well, so everyone keeps track of where they're at. Having students, giving them the choice of how much they read. I know I've done, you can read 1, 2, or 3 sentences. And when I do that, students always choose 3 sentences. But if I were to say, I want you to read 3 sentences, they're like, that's way too much, right? So give them that choice. And when they're done, they can pass it to another person. Another way you can do this is called wagon wheel, where you read, pass it to a student, the student reads, passes back to you, you read, pass it to a student. That means half of everything is read fluently, and you have more control of who you're asked to read. And then the last variation, stealing from a colleague, Liddy Rich, and what she does is she'll take the text and she'll bold some of the sentences and underline some of the sentences and italicize some of the sentences and leave some of them normal. And then she'll assign a role. Kristine, it's your job to read the italicized sentences. Patsy, it's your job to read the underlined sentences. Marisa, it's your job to read the bolded sentences. And that way the students know what they're supposed to do. But it's all the same activity, just giving them the chance to read out loud and practice.
One other point about collaborative oral reading, and I would do this with, we do this a couple times a week with a longer piece as we'd work through it. But one of the great things about this is that students can be working on different things. And so if you've got a small group, some students, their focus might be accuracy. And that's what you're really listening for is that they're accurately saying the words. Whereas some students who may have the accuracy are really going to be focusing on reading with rate and prosody. And so you're listening for those students to read rate and prosody. So you can have a little bit more of a mixed group. Students don't need to know who's working on what. You as the teacher are listening for accuracy, rate, or prosody. So.
And again, my plug for volunteers, because differentiating for these activities is great. Having that one support is great. So please consider using volunteers to help out in the fluency part of your lesson. All right, back to Kristine.
And I think we had an example here of a nice length text. Some of us had students, just when you're done, wherever you're at, call on another student. And sometimes then what happens is it turns into a little bit of a game and the focus shifts because they're trying to get gotcha. Like, I'm going to stop in the middle of a sentence and you better be paying attention. So I think reading complete sentences. And there have even been times where I have marked the text. If it was, virtual on a slide, I mark it, every 2 or 3 sentences so that students are very, are clear about when to pass. That was just an extra visual clue. And
you realize people don't know each other's names, which is also unfortunate.
Right. And so it really depends on the group that you have. I've worked with some groups where, they were like 4 or 5 students, kind of a core, and they knew each other because they were together all day. So, but yeah, so I've also seen it where you like toss a koosh ball or something at somebody and they catch it, and then, they're the next person to read. So I think there's a lot of different ways to do this. I'm looking here. This time has gone by very quickly. I want to make sure that we have a little bit of reflection time here, and also the teacher recommended fluency resources. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this, and you've seen this before if you've been in these webinars because it's got all 4 components on it. But a couple things here when it comes to the fluency. I'm going to make it just a little bit bigger here. There's some great websites. These are teacher recommended ESL literacy readers. Those are for really go low to where there's the sentences are accompanied by pictures, and they can be 3-word sentences. They're very low. These are all free. Reading skills for healthcare workers is branch off of reading skills for today's adults. If you don't know about reading skills for today's adults, each of the passages has 3 different speeds of reading that students can listen to. The first one is mainly for accuracy. The second reading, and these are all recorded that students can play, is chunking phrases. And then the third is like a normal reading with rate and prosody. So students can certainly work and listen to repeat the readings. There's some free with sign up or subscription: Breaking News English, Common Lit, Moby Max. Newsela is going to be changing as of June. They're pulling back even more on their free content. ReadWorks is all free. Read Theory, The Times in Plain English. Story by Story still exists. I know that Marn had a big part in Story by Story. There's a link there. The Change Agent, which is, for what you get, it's probably the cheapest resource you'll ever pay for all that you get for the Change Agent. All of those texts are written by adults. A lot of them are students from programs just like ours. There are some leveled books for purchase. A lot of these are abridged, like the Townsend Press. They're these wonderful abridged books of classics and other books. And I've done it with students where they've just been so excited because they've read an entire book. But these are all, fluency. They're available. We also have some great things in the Atlas Library about fluency. And of course, we have the passages to use to assess fluency, both in your participant folder with the I can't remember now, the easy passages, the free ones that are there. We also have the Bader fluency passages. You saw that modeled in the 3 videos today. That is something you need to directly email me for, and I can send you that and the score sheet. And that is available, both something you can make a copy of to be, if you're with students, or Marn also put them on slides. So if you are assessing virtually, it's all set up for you, ready to go. Last thought, one or both: a fluency instructional success I anticipate. Now that you've learned a little bit about assessing, or we've refreshed it in your mind, and we've talked about some strategies, what is the success that you anticipate? And then what is a challenge that you anticipate? Go ahead and put that in the chat box. And I'm also going to give Rob a chance for any closing comments.
Oh, I have none. Thanks for being here. Thanks for recognizing the importance of fluency.
Yeah, and thanks for your participation. It was great. The questions in the chat box and your reflections. So, got a few minutes here. So what is a success you anticipate and a challenge? I know that when we did repeated readings and my students would practice after they would hear it, they would get excited and they would all clamor, like, can I read it for you now? I think I can do it perfectly, which was fun. Adding the wagon wheel reading idea. All right. Great. Yeah, it's so great. Pass it to the student, take it back, pass it to another student. Better fluency in your level 2 readers. Yeah. By reading phrases or sentences at a time. And again, I felt it was really important, as much as I could communicate to my students, the rationale. We're working on this because it's going to help you understand more, which is the goal, right? Enjoying reading with expression, poems. Yeah, it's so great when they start getting so confident and they read with that expression. Volunteers. These are such concrete activities for volunteers. And it's fun for the volunteers because the volunteers see that progress, like that concrete progress, which I know really keeps them going too. Yeah, students will love this. Don't assume that students, just because you have like pre-GED students, it's all in how you present it. Any challenges? Yeah, when you have a multi-level class. Yep. So So sometimes I would work, individually with students when students were working on something else, if they were able to work, if they were at a high enough level that they could work independently or in small groups. And then I would pull students. Echo reading.
And again, remember, you can always read text out loud to the whole class, and level doesn't matter as much. And then, pick just a low level text and do the activity with the whole class. And, it'll be good practice for the higher level students and be at the instructional level for the lower.
Marisa just dropped. Yep, please contact Rob or me. If you want to contact me, I'm happy to, forward it on to Rob. Rob has been doing these trainings. And also if you have questions about your volunteers, learning these techniques or getting more information, Rob is your contact over at Literacy Minnesota. There's an evaluation link in the chat box. Click on that. Once you finish the evaluation, you will get your 1.5 CEUs. We'll hang out for a few minutes. Thank you so much for joining us on this Friday, and hope you have a wonderful weekend. And yes, I know the weather, we're starting to take a good turn.
Finally. Thank you, Rob and Kristine, for all your work on this. It's really great to see. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. And